Welcome back to Crossover Commander, where we show you how to take your favorite pop culture characters and cross them through the blind eternities so that they can command your deck with style. I'd like to send a huge shout out to my patrons, Deface and Zephyr at the Adept tier, and my new patron Nitron at the Knight tier. Just as an FYI to everybody, patrons at my Knight tier and my Champion tier are able to request special fan-made decks, and Nitron, your deck is coming here soon. As for this week's deck, it was voted on by all of my patrons. Let's kick this portal into overdrive, shall we? All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. That poem by Tolkien was obviously referencing Aragorn, the true heir to Elendil and true king of both Gondor and Arnor. And with that, I present to you Aragorn the card. For a red, a green, and a white, he is a legendary human warrior, and when Aragorn enters the battlefield, target opponent becomes the monarch. You can't become the monarch this turn. If damage will be dealt to Aragorn while you're the monarch, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on him. This card works perfectly for Aragorn, and Aragorn works perfectly to lead the Fellowship. If the prophecy is rushed, the return of the king can come as early as turn 3. But this deck is more about the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. To be the heir of Elendil, you must be able to muster the free peoples and the forces of the West. With the strength and courage of our friends, the armies of the West will triumph. This is the perfect time to remind you that this is a crossover-themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme will be added regardless of price. Cards that are not essential to fit the theme will be made as budget-friendly as possible. As Tolkien did, we will also begin with home. We have Carpulson Forest, Crowson Verge, Gruul Turf, Game Trail, Fortified Village, Boros Garrison, Razor Verge Thicket, and Battlefield Ford, as well as Sunpetal Grove, Rootbound Crag, Selesnya Sanctuary, and Rugged Prick, and ending with a command tower, 4 mountains, 9 plains, and 10 forests. It is at home that we find our reason for the quest. The One Ring, as made for me by AlexMan037. Over on TikTok, he made this beautiful soul ring for me. Thank you, man. And in order to make sure we keep the rest of our ramp package on point, we've got Arcane Signet, Growing Rites of Itlimoc, and Zendikar Resurgent. We begin with the elves, the fairest and wisest of all creatures. With Elrond for a hybrid Selesnya. He is a legendary elf warrior. For 2 and a Selesnya, you can tap him to create a green and white elf warrior creature token. And for 4 and 2 Selesnya, for each creature token you control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. And then we have Arwen Undomnia for a green and a white, a legendary elf cleric. Whenever Arwen becomes tapped, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. Then we have Elrohir for 1, a red and a green. As long as it's your turn, Elrohir has first strike. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands from the top of your library. And then for 4, a red and a green, Elrohir gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. We have Elladan for 2, a red and a green. It's a legendary elf warrior with haste, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red and or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And then is Halbarad of the North, one of the leaders of the Dunedain. We have, for 1 and a green, a legendary human scout, and you can't get poison counters, and creatures you control can't have -1/-1 counters placed on them, and creatures your opponents control lose infect. Then we have the forces of the Galathrim, led by Galadriel, the Lady of Light. For 1, a red, a green, and a white, this legendary elf spirit says at the beginning of your combat on your turn, up to 1 target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is Galadriel's power. It's still land. She also has a landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. And then we have Celeborn for 3 and a green. Whenever a player taps a mountain, forest, or plains for mana, that player adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. And then we have Haldir for 1 and a green. It has a tap ability of 3 and a green. Tap to search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Then we have Rumil and Orphan, Haldir's brothers. For 2, a red and a green, you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and for a red and a green, you can return a land you control to your hand, and target creature gains trample until end of turn. The Horse Lords of the Rohirrim will also aid us in our quest. We start with King Theoden for 1 and 2 white. This legendary human knight has vigilance, and when Theoden's power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player, or a planeswalker they control. And then we have Eomer for 3, a red and a white. This legendary human knight has melee. It says whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attacked with a creature this combat, and he allows other creatures you control to also have melee. Then we have Eowyn for 2, a green and a white. This legendary human noble has Coven, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. Then if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, draw a card. And then Mustering the Rohirrim comes as the Cathar's Crusade for 3 and 2 white. This enchantment says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. And then Valiant Endeavor for 4 and 2 white says roll 2d6 and choose 1 result. Destroy each creature with power greater than or equal to that result. Then create a number of 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance equal to the other result. And with the assistance of Gondor, we shall see victory. We begin with Faramir for 2, a green, and 2 white. Other creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. And then we have the Lord Denethor for 3 and a white. This legendary human has lifelink, and whenever an opponent attacks with a creature, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, you draw a card, and whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you also draw a card. And then we have Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth. And a quick side note, I can't believe that this is the guy that the movies chose to be Prince Imrahil. He was so much cooler in the books. This dude was not a good representation in the movie. But for 1, a green, and a white, Prince Imrahil has training. Whenever this creature attacks, with another creature with greater power, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. And whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human soldier creature token with training. And then we have Assemble the Legions. For 3, a red and a white. It's an enchantment, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put a muster counter on Assemble the Legion, and then put a 1/1 red and white soldier creature token with haste onto the battlefield for each muster counter on Assemble the Legion. And then we have Martial Coup. For X and 2 white, create X +1/+1 white soldier creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. This will help symbolize the battle at the Pelennor Fields for us. Now that we have seen the Free Peoples, we come to the Fellowship. As stated earlier, Aragorn leads this Fellowship. For a red, a green, and a white, Aragorn, the true heir, enters the battlefield. Target opponent becomes the monarch. You can't become the monarch this turn. If damage would be dealt to Aragorn while you are the monarch, prevent the damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on him. And then we have Legolas. For 1 and 2 green. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. This may help our opponents at some times, but it will also help us, for we have some friends coming. And for a green, you can tap and add X mana in any combination of colors, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And then we have Gimli. For 2, a red and a white, this legendary dwarf warrior says for each creature you control gets +2/+0 for each equipment attached to it, and you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate each turn. Then we have Boromir, Captain of Gondor. For 2 and 2 white, this legendary human soldier has vigilance, and creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. Then we have Gandalf the Grey. For 3, a green and a white. This legendary Maya is indestructible. As long as your devotion to green and white is less than 7, Gandalf isn't a creature. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. At last, we come to the ring bearer, Frodo. For a green and a white, this legendary Kithkin, or Hobbit in this case, says non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater can't be cast. And then non-creature spells with X in their mana cost can't be cast as well. And then we have Samwise the Brave. For 1 and 2 white, this legendary hobbit says for 1 and 2 white, you can untap him to return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to play, making sure that Samwise can always rescue Frodo. And then we have Meriadoc Brandybuck. For 3 and a white, he says, night creatures you control have double strike. We don't have very many, but he partners very well with our friends from Rohan. And then we have Peregrine Took, or Pippin. And he says, Kithkin spells and soldier spells you play cost 1 less, and plays very well with our Gondorian allies. And as Iluvatar has willed, our presence has been like small stones to start an avalanche, and we gain the assistance of some powerful friends in the form of the Ents. Treebeard, for 3, 2 red and 2 green, is a legendary creature elemental, and he has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token, and whenever Treebeard or another elemental you control dies, Treebeard deals 3 damage to any target. And then we have Kodama of the East Tree. For 4 and 2 green, this legendary spirit has reach, and whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. And then we have Soul of the Harvest. For 4 and 2 green, this elemental has trample, and whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. And then we have Woodfall Primus for 5 and 3 green. This Treefolk Shaman has trample, and whenever Woodfall Primus enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent. And then it has Persist, where if it dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 trigger, or counter, and this will combo with Halbarad from earlier. And then we have Gwai here, the Windlord, for 3 and white. This legendary bird cleric has flying, and whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then we have Landraval, for 3 and a white, has flying, and 3 and 2 white. You can sacrifice Landraval to remove all black creatures from the game. And then we have Meneldor for 2 and 2 white. It has flying, and whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. And then we have the attack of the Eagles and Akroma's Will, or in this case Manway's Will, for 3 and a white. It says choose one. If you control a commander as you cast the spell, you may choose both. Creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, and creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. It is said that the King of Gondor can summon an army more terrible than anything that has walked this earth. And with that, we use these cards to create our Dead Men of Dunharrow army. We start with the Mausoleum Guard as the King of the Dead for 3 and a white. When Mausoleum Guard dies, put 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. And then we have the Stone of Erech for 3 generic mana. It says sacrifice a creature, add 2 generic mana to your mana pool. And then we have Nim's Death Mantle, or the Army of the Dead. For 2 generic, it says equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Intimidate and is a black zombie. Whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Death Mantle to it. So what you will do here is you will sacrifice the King of the Dead to the Stone of Erech, and then also sacrifice one of the spirits that comes when he dies, to then activate the Nim's Death Mantle to bring him back and make an endless army of invincible dead. And last but not least, we have Golem. For 2 and a red, whenever an opponent taps an artifact for mana, gain control of that artifact until the end of your next turn. It is at this time that we will begin to understand all of Iluvatar's plan for Arda. We start with Gandalf the White. For 4 and 2 white, this legendary planeswalker has 3 abilities. The first ability is put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. The second is destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. And then the last is you get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. And then we have Mael's Aria. For a red, a green, and a white, at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. If you control a creature with power 5 or greater, then you gain 10 life. If you control a creature with power 10 or greater, then you win the game if you control a creature with power 20 or greater. Then we have Primal Vigor for 4 and a green. If 1 or more tokens will be put onto the battlefield, twice that many of those tokens are put onto the battlefield instead. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on that creature instead. Then we have the Court of Grace for 2 and 2 white. When Court of Grace enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. If you are the monarch, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. And then we have Austere Command for 4 and 2 white. It says choose 2, destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, and destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. I would like to take a minute to put some special focus to certain characters, starting with Legolas. Now, we already have gone through his card, but we have a combo truly befitting of him. With Viridian Longbow for 1 generic mana, this creature gains tap, this creature deals 1 damage to any target. And then we have Quietus Spike for 3 generic mana. It says, equipped creature has Death Touch, and whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half his or her life rounded up. And then with Thornbite Staff for 2 generic mana and an equip cost of 4, it allows this creature to untap if a creature card is sent to the graveyard from play. So what this will allow you to do is use Legolas to bow down all of the opponents on the battlefield. And then we look at Gimli and his axes. We have the Bearded Axe for 2 and a red. It has equipped creature, gets +1/+1 for each dwarf, equipment, and or vehicle you control. And it has an equip cost of 2. Then we have the Great Axe for 1 generic mana. It has an equip cost of 5 and gives equipped creature +4/+0. And then we have the Swiftfoot Boots, which gives equipped creature haste and hexproof, because dwarves are very dangerous over short distances. And then we look at Gandalf's Sword and Boromir's Horn. We've got Glamdring for 3 generic mana. It says equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance, and is a knight in addition to its other types. Whenever equipped creature attacks, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance that's attacking. And then we've got the Horn of Gondor for 3 generic mana. Whenever a player plays a land, that player draws a card. And then we have Frodo's Glorious Sunrise, as he wrote about in the Book of Westmarch. For 3 and 2 green, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose 1. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. Or target land gains add 3 green mana until end of turn. Or draw a card if you control a creature with power 3 or greater, or gain 3 life. And then we have Sting for 2 generic mana. I chose to keep the original art for Sword of the Animist because it shows kind of the lineage of Sting being an elven blade. And it gives equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And then we've got Frodo's Mithril Shirt. For 3 generic mana, it is indestructible, and equipped creature has indestructible. And then last but not least, we have the Heirlooms of Aragorn's House. The Throne of Gondor for 4 generic mana. It says for 1 tap, put a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield. Put 5 of those tokens onto the battlefield instead if you control artifacts named Crown and Scepter of Empires. And then we have Elendil's Crown for 2 generic mana. It says for 3 and a tap, you can tap target creature, but if you control all 3 requisite pieces, you can gain control of that creature instead. And then we have the Scepter of Empires for 3 generic mana, and it has tap. Scepter deals 1 damage to target player. It deals 3 damage instead if you control all 3. And then we have Narsil, reforged into Enduril, the Flame of the West. It is a legendary artifact, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control. and equip a legendary creature for 3 mana. Now that the Free Peoples have achieved victory, we can check out the average price of this deck. At time of release, it's between $264 and $370, depending on where you purchase it from. As always, if you're willing to play with heavily played or damaged cards, the price can be a lot less. And then for the stats, we've got a lot of ramp coming in at 16. We have 0 tutors. It's not that the Fellowship doesn't have a plan, it's just that they have a very limited amount of resources at their disposal. And then we have 7 card draws for the same reason. Then we have 10 forms of interaction, 6 board wipes, if you include some combo board wipes, as well as 36 lands. Remember, this is a crossover themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme were added regardless of price. Cards that were not essential to fit the theme were made as budget-friendly as possible. If you want to optimize this list, feel free to leave your upgrades in the comments section below. Most importantly, this deck is meant to be a new and engaging way to spice up your Commander games, so fun is the top priority. Thank you for watching this crossover deck tech. If you liked this video, check out our other content on YouTube or TikTok. Your viewership means the multiverse to the crossover commander, and if you would like to become a part of this growing Terran reality, you can like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to vote on the next pop culture character to crossover, check out our Patreon where we have some awesome perks. If you have any ideas or complaints, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Now that this portal's closing, see you next time.